Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I'm building the back of a commercial street for behind my station. There were 192 shapes to cut out to get this far with Chandwell's old poor law building, and I did them all by hand. In this video I'm going to show how I approached the task of preparing these 3 layers ready for construction. So let's get on with it and take a look at cutting layers for a card building. Having settled on the final design, I printed it as a simple line drawing onto an A4 sticky label. I find that lines drawn in 60% grey at 0.2mm thick work really well. This building has these arched recesses which themselves hold windows. For that reason, I'm making the outer part of the wall from 2 layers of 0.5mm greyboard card. The doorways are recessed further, so I'll be using a 3rd layer of 1mm greyboard. This will give the doorways some depth, whilst also resulting in a very sturdy component once finished. This is the outer layer, and the one with the most cutting. There are 70 openings to cut out, as well as the overall building shape, which makes 71 shapes to cut. I use a normal craft knife for the large shape. I always cut from the inside of the shape out. This keeps me consistent across the full shape, but more importantly, it keeps the most amount of material underneath the ruler to keep it sturdy. The blade is sharp and the card is thin, but I still use very light strokes. It takes 3 passes to get the cut complete. This helps to prolong the life of the blade, but more importantly, it reduces the risk of slips and accidents. When I cut windows on a base layer that will be covered by a separate texture, I always overcut the windows. Starting with the card one way around, I cut all the horizontal lines on the bottom of the windows. I then turn the card 180 degrees and do the next set of horizontal lines. This ensures that I can always see the vertical lines of the windows and I don't need to guess where the line starts and ends. I always start just before the line and overshoot the end by 1mm or so. I gently cut the curved tops by hand, using 4 light strokes to easily introduce the curve. I then turn 90 degrees and repeat for the sides of the windows. Another 180 degree turn and the other sides are done. Because each line has overshot the corners, the pieces drop out with a gentle nudge. Or most do, anyway. I don't force the sticky ones. Any rip can leave a little fluffy corner piece that's hard to get rid of. I just redo the corners by pressing down with a scalpel until the piece pops out. Lovely crisp cuts. Having said that, this one escaped and has left a fluffy corner. A few cuts and the sharp blade should sort it out, but I'd rather avoid this if I can help it. The 2 large arches need to be cut next. I use a Swan Morton scalpel with a 10A blade. This is a very sharp blade with a fine point, which makes cutting arches really straightforward. I carefully position the point of the blade onto the printed line and have the knife pointing back along the curve. I then very lightly and very slowly draw the knife along the line. I turn the card rather than the knife, so that my wrist holding the knife doesn't have to twist. This keeps the blade on the line and in sight at all times. So this arch now has a slight cut in the surface of the card. I use this groove now to feel my way around the cut a second time. This is a very sharp blade and it got through the 0.5mm card in 2 passes. Older blades and thicker card can require 5 or even 10 passes, but the technique is the same, slow and light. The next layer was also cut from 0.5mm card. This one has these tiny arches on it. The technique here is exactly the same. I lightly go around the arch, turning the card rather than the blade. Because there were these tiny mullions here, I didn't want to rip them, so I kept my finger on these. I didn't want to slice them off, so did not drag my blade over the lines. I just worked into the corners. This meant that at the end I needed to go over the corners again before the piece popped out. Again, I keep my knife in one position and always move the card underneath it. These really are tiny. If you're familiar with our smallest coin, here's a 5p piece. If you're not, here's a ruler. The chimney has a fancy bit of stonework which is simply too small to cut using the techniques already shown. For these, I just add as many small slices as possible, starting at the line and coming off in a perpendicular direction. These then just slice off using little stabbing moves with the scalpel. That's not too bad. So here are the 3 layers. This is how the arches all go together. I printed the cover layer complete with guides for the additional detailing which will come later. I used simple lines to represent the individual stones of the arches. The stone mullions and window parts are less than 1 millimetre wide in places. There's no way I can use my usual texture wrapping technique on these, so I decided to just paint them. I had some of this surface primer, which is a great colour match for the printed texture. The wet paint warped the very delicate card slightly, but it dried well enough. I used PVA to stick the texture to the base layer. This allows some wriggle time to get it perfectly lined up. I cut across the arch at the base of the curved bit, and then add loads of slices from the arch down to the centre. Once scored, covered in glue and bent back around the arch, the result is quite convincing. I'm happy with that. In my next video, I'll be experimenting getting these little arches populated with convincing stained glass. I am looking forward to that one. Did you know that I've started making behind the scenes videos at the weekends? These are only a few minutes long, but I show what I'm working on and what I'm thinking about. They're available to members of my channel. If you're interested, please use the join button underneath the video or in the description. So that you know the kinds of things I talk about, here's a free look at one from a couple of weeks ago. So, my next regular video should be about stained glass. Until then, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.